Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of the ManageSpace podcast. I'm James McLean. I'm the head of business development at Radius Plus. And one thing I really like about my job is the fact that I get to connect with people in the industry like yourself and discuss all things self-storage. Can you start off by telling us a little about yourself?
Sure. So right now I am one of the partners, managing partners for the self-storage division at PassiveInvesting.com. I work pretty closely with my other partner, John, finding, funding, and closing self-storage deals. We have 2 funds right now that we've closed out and 1 deal outside the fund. But in total, we've done about $120 million in deals in the last about 1.5, 2 years or so, something like that. Excuse me. So so it's been good. That's when we started at Passive. Before that, John and I actually had our own small company, an LLC. We didn't really do much with it other than look for storage deals in the Charlotte market. We wound that down and obviously joined it with PassiveInvesting.com, which was a smart decision. Prior to that, I actually worked for a company called 10 Federal. Some of you guys might know about that who watched the show or have heard of that company. Great company, good guys to work with. That's how I got my start really in the storage business. Before that, I was at school at UNC Chapel Hill, Keenan Flagler's business school. And I was part of a private equity real estate fund there. And before that, going back to ancient times, I actually got my real estate license in '07. So if any of your listeners or viewers can think back to that time, that was right before the Great Recession in '08 and '09 when real estate actually destroyed the economy. We shot ourselves in the foot back then. But that's when I got started. I was doing general brokerage on the residential side, but working with asset managers and banks and whatnot to relist foreclosed properties for sale. So that's the story in a nutshell. Had an interesting time with residential real estate, and actually, coincidentally, ironically, for your listeners or viewers, actually hated real estate as a result of it because I was doing foreclosure work, literally going with the sheriff's deputy and changing locks on doors and evicting people from homes. So my taste of real estate was not very positive back then. So I actually went to school to do something completely different, do a bunch of nerdy math, science stuff, and then found out about real estate and how you actually raise money and buy apartments. And I was in shock and awe. And I was like, oh my gosh! Like I worked. My first job at school was while I was in school was working for a guy in Chapel Hill when he was syndicating equity and raising capital to buy apartments. And so that's why I figured out, this is how it's done. This is how you buy 150 doors at one time versus 150 houses like over multiple years. So anyway, so that's the story in a nutshell.
No, great. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm curious, how did you transition from, like you said, your old real estate past, and you didn't have a great perception of it, into self-storage, into getting involved with 10 Federal? What kind of steps brought you there?
Yeah, usually it's like a progression, right? For all of us, we hear about something, we might table that in the back of our minds, and then, that person, like 3 months later, somebody mentions something, like, oh yeah, that, I'll look into it or whatever. So for me, it was a step-by-step process. I hated real estate, went to Chapel Hill, was going to do some nerdy math science stuff, actually found out I didn't like that. I applied to the business school, got in, and then I found out about real estate there. And the first job actually got me back up. The first job I got while I was going to go do the nerdy math Asian stuff, math Asian, half Korean, I was going to go do all that stuff. This was the only job I could find. It was like ironic. So I went to go work for him, and he was buying apartments, and I realized, this is how you do it. And then I got in the real estate private equity fund at Chapel Hill. And I realized, this is how they do it in retail, in hotels, in storage, and whatever else. Then I got I graduated, got my job at 10 Federal. We were targeting apartment complexes. I wasn't even thinking about storage. I was thinking about apartments, which was like kind of the cool thing to do, and still is in some ways. So, I was doing apartment acquisitions, and we ended up pivoting, just to make a long story short, pivoting to self-storage. Because every time we talked to a broker or whatever, like the two partners there, Brad and Cliff, whenever they would talk to a broker about what 10 Federal was doing, the storage stuff was always very interesting to them. Obviously because they don't do it on a day-to-day basis, but at the same time, there's like technology and unmanned and all this other things that you can do within the storage world that they were not used to. So when the partners would explain it, their eyes they would get excited. So we ended up, Brad came, I think I mentioned to him, like, hey, let's think about the storage side of the business, because not too many people are very interested in the multifamily stuff we're doing. I don't know. Let's think about that. So Brad came up with the idea, hey, we're going to start a fund, and we're going to go out and buy self-storage, and we're going to turn them from mom and pop operations to unattended, using technology, et cetera. So So I didn't know anything about storage. I had to like kind of start from scratch. And then I realized as time went on, hey, there's a lot of pros to doing storage versus multifamily or whatever else. And I just liked it better. That was just my perception of it. I liked it better, and I liked the pros of it more than the cons of it. So that's how I got down that path. And that's what I wanted to focus on. I realized this is where I want to be doing self-storage.
No, that's great. I think you have a very unique experience in that you worked real estate through the 2008 recession, and you got your hands with in some self-storage as well. Because there is a narrative that self-storage is recession resilient. And so I kind of wanted to get your feedback on that as we are going into another recession. Hopefully it's not as bad as the last one, but do you have any thoughts on that, and any thoughts on how self-storage will hold up compared to other asset classes during this time?
Yeah, usually that story of recession resilience, not resistance, right, but resilience, it stays strong usually during recessions, comes from 08, 09. Because if anybody can go back and look at the data, you go to NAREIT or REIT.com and you can download the data and just run your own analysis on that with REIT returns. So it's all going to be publicly traded companies. It won't be private offerings and whatnot, but based upon the publicly traded data from self-storage apartments, everything you can think of within the real estate world, the REIT world, they made a comparison. They found out that storage performed really well. I think in 08, it was positive. One of the only, if not the only asset class that was positive, had a positive return, and that return wasn't very big. It was like 5% or something like that, but everything else was negative. And then the following year, it wasn't as strong, but it's because storage was already strong, right? And I think apartments did better in the following year as far as the magnitude of change in return. So if people want to go back and look at that, you can verify that, but that's where the idea comes from. Then the SBA got involved, and they realized, hey, the Small Business Administration, hey, storage did very well. We'll make loans to people who want to own and operate their own storage because it's technically a business. It's an operating business. You can't get an SBA loan for apartment investing, for example, but you can for storage. So I think there's a great story there with pandemic, right? We saw the data there that people were decluttering their homes to make room to work from home, which I don't think work from home is going to completely go away. I know there's some hybrid, things that are happening out there, et cetera, but so people decluttered, and storage actually ended up performing very well during the pandemic. It was almost like the pandemic was made for self-storage, if you can say it that way, because it did so well. So I think based upon those historical returns and the story there, we can expect that storage will do well again going forward. Again, we'll probably see dips in occupancy. We'll see dips in rates as well. Because that's just natural, right? Some people will move out of storage. Some people will stop paying. Some people will determine that they don't need it anymore or whatever. And some people are going to say, hey, I don't need it as long as I thought I did. I'm just going to get rid of the stuff. It happens. So do I think storage will perform poorly it's either going to be up, sideways, or down, right? Those are the three options. Either goes up, sideways, or down in different magnitudes. So I think that will probably hold steady. We'll probably, if there's a recession, we'll see declines everywhere, of course, and storage won't be the exception there. But I think that it will still hold steady because of the business and the way that it operates. And it is a sticky tenant base for the most part, even though it's like Netflix, right? It's a month-to-month rate. It's a month-to-month agreement. You can cancel anytime. It's easier to go online and cancel your Netflix subscription than it is to go online and cancel your unit and then go move all the stuff out, right? That's a big pain in the butt. So some people will still do it. They'll go through the pain, but others will just say, hey, it's not worth the trouble. So, I think we'll definitely see some slowdowns as far as on the consumer side with rates, with occupancy, but I still think it will do well during any potential next recession going forward based upon history.
No, absolutely. And I love what you said about all the drivers that COVID-19 and the pandemic brought on for self-storage.
Yeah.
And I was curious, you started up your most recent organization about a year and a half ago. Did that decision to start it up have anything to do with all the drivers you saw from COVID-19, and you saw that there was a big opportunity for self-storage and you started your own thing? Was there any correlation there?
Not really, because I was about 2017 was when I started to learn about self-storage. We did that first fund with 10 Federal and all that, and I realized this is where I want to be in the long run. I don't want to do anything else except for storage acquisitions. Good, bad, ugly, doesn't matter what's going on in the economy. This is where I'm at. So in 2020, it was the end of 2020, I think, when Dan and we had a previous relationship. I knew him from before he really had bought anything in real estate, so we had stayed in contact. I went to his first meetup that he ever had. So that's where the relationship came from. So the partners there, Dan and Brandon, reached out to myself and then John, who I was working with at the time, with our own LLC, and they said, hey, we want to go buy storage. I'm just paraphrasing here. We want to go buy storage. Let's talk. And so we said, sure. We were already looking for it. We had 2 deals under contract in the Charlotte market. So let's go ahead and let's talk and see what we can come up with. So it really wasn't. I think overall the story of storage was a constant. In other words, all the pros of storage, sticky tenant base, ability to raise rents, month-to-month leases, no evictions. It's just, auctions, not evictions. All of the pros of storage in their minds. It wasn't connected to the pandemic. The pandemic and the situation there was just kind of the icing on the cake. That's all. So, and I think for most of the listeners, anybody who's been in the business longer than me knows that it's like a constant. This is a great business to be in, no matter what's going on in the economy. Sure, we are affected. We're not exempt from what happens in the economy, but the story remains the same regardless of what's going on. And the pandemic was just icing on the cake as far as showing the performance of self-storage. So, yeah. So long answer to to your question.
No, thank you for that. I think it's very true that like the foundation is there and like the metrics were there. The pandemic just exacerbated those drivers.
Exactly.
And kind of brought attention to it.
Yeah.
I'm wondering though if self-storage will get a lot more attention on like a larger level from like larger publications with us going into another recession and coming off the tailwinds of the pandemic. I hope that it brings more attention from like smaller investors as well as larger organizations to take interest in this industry because it is very resilient, and I think it's a great way to hedge against inflation as well. For what we're seeing, the cost of living is just going up everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I think that I think there's 2 ways to look at it. One is just from a investor perspective. That once we, let's say we do have a recession this year, and it's over by the end of the year, whatever, best case scenario. Excuse me. We'll look back at the data and people will say, okay, storage, let's just say that it did well during the recession, the upcoming potential recession. Looking back in 2024, 2023, storage still performed well, so on and so forth. So you'll probably see more once the data is out there and the articles are written. Then people will find out more about it and the institutional investors will become more interested in it. That's been happening, from the time I was in the business in 2016 and 17. It's just been more and more entrants into the business and people who've gone back further, right? So people who were in the business in 2005 or even before that, it's done nothing but grow and grow and grow and grow as far as investor and institutional investor interest. I think on the flip side, when you come to active investor interest, that's been growing as well. And so that can be detrimental to people or I guess irritating to people who have already been in the business for a while because now you have, literally during 2021 and 2022, we'd make offers on properties and you'd have, 20 to 30 offers on a deal. The brokers have to wrap their arms around that and figure out who's the best potential buyer. So luckily we won a few, but the point is that it makes it, there's so many more people bidding on storage for the reasons that we've already talked about. So there's 2 ways of looking at it. The passive investor, the institutional investor who's trying to find partners who are out there doing the work, and then the other folks who the startups are. There'll be new groups that come out there, storage, whatever, ABC Capital, storage partners, and they'll start existing in 2024, and they're going to go out and they're going to say all the things that we just talked about. Storage is this and that and blah, blah, blah. And they're like the new entrants because they saw the data and they said, yeah, let's jump in and buy more storage. Just like we did, back in 2017 and all that. So the story will continue on and on, we think.
Absolutely. But I think one thing that you really impressed me with is even back then, you guys had a focus at 10 Federal about automation and about adding value to these facilities that might not have integrated technology or these kind of practices. And one thing from the Radius side we notice is some people are adverse to it. It's like a little bit in the past in terms of adopting new practices and adopting new systems. What are your thoughts on integrating technology and integrating automation for a better customer experience and also sort of ways to add value for a facility?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a couple ways to look at it. One is just I think there's like the manned model. We have it staffed or whatever people want to call it, staffed, and then you have unstaffed. Where you take a store or a facility, excuse me, and you just literally let the manager go, and you hire somebody to be a boots on the ground. They go and they check on it every so often. In both of those, I think a lot of people who push back are kind of pushing back on that concept of the unattended or the unstaffed model because they think, hey, you got to have someone on site, customer service and whatnot.
Right.
There is truth to that. So it's not one size fits all. I think in both cases, the staff and the unstaffed, you can use a number of different automations and technologies to assist the manager or the boots on the ground person. Plus and you also have a call center in this case. In both cases, you can have a call center. So in reality, I think that's the big change is going from manned or staffed to unstaffed. Because in both cases, I know of staff places. Think of public storage, Extra Space. They have call centers that field the calls, right? When you call, it's not ringing typically at the actual store. It goes to their call center, and they answer your questions and whatnot. And they tell you, oh, we don't have any here, but we have one on this location 3 miles away, whatever. So that's how, and they're automated when it comes to like rent collection, sending out texts, sending out emails that are just automated. Click the link to pay your bill. Like you want those automated processes, whether you're staffed or unstaffed. That takes a lot of time away from the manager who can do other things, help people move in, handle customer service issues, go check on units, whatever the case may be. So there is a difference there. There's also a difference, I think. So at 10 Federal, we were doing the latter. We were going from staffed to unstaffed at these locations, which in a lot of cases made the operations better. Because when you go look at like smaller mom and pop locations, maybe 30,000 square feet or less, typically if the owner is not operating it, they have somebody local who is, and that person's, maybe a minimum wage employee, and they're just not the customer service person that you'd want to have on site. And so oftentimes when you buy a facility like that and you do implement the technology and you let go of a poor performing manager, things actually get better. Some people don't like change. They're going to move out anyway, like whoever. It doesn't matter what happens. Like, I don't know the new person. Maybe they had a handshake deal with the previous owner or whatever for a discount on the rent, whatever. People are just going to move out. That's fine. But the point is you can actually make it better in the long run by going unattended in some cases. We found that it doesn't fit every single location. So we bought locations. We went unattended on all of them. We found out, hey, there's some customer service issues. Sometimes people who live in or they go to a nicer facility, they want more hands-on, right? And they want to walk in the door and see somebody there. That just happens, right? Not everybody is going to be comfortable with changes and whatnot. You got to do it with a white glove service. You got to kind of tee it up if you're going to do it. You got to be super friendly. You got to have the right customer service in place. There's going to be bad reviews. You got to go on and handle the bad reviews properly. Like, there's all kinds of stuff that happens when a takeover occurs. And I think when you go from attended to unattended, if that's your business plan, you got to have even more of a white glove kind of hand holding there for the current customer base to make that successful. So I love unattended. I love technologies, and I love the automated processes, right? And I think both models can benefit from having a lot of automation in place with collecting bills and renting units online and having a good website, et cetera. And then depends on what you want to do. If you want to go fully unattended, there's some things you have to work around and think about with that model. So, yeah, I think it's great. I love the tech, and I think everybody can benefit from it. But I understand, like you were saying, the pushback that you might get from some folks. And I understand that. Like, hey, unattended is not for everybody, and that's okay. But we did see, I'm kind of rambling here, but last thing with the pandemic, and confirming my business partner, John, he went to the New York, they just had the big show up there, and then another conference on the back end of that. But one of the REITs was talking about their stores and locations and how, I don't remember the percentage that he told me, maybe it was 5 or 10% or whatever, but a percentage of their stores have gone to an unattended, quote unquote, unmanned model. So, and that's one of the REITs. So it's definitely doable if you do it right. And I think this particular REIT is doing it right. So definitely.
So that kind of brings me perfectly into my next question is, there's sometimes this narrative that like unmanned works really well when you have a huge bankroll to kind of manage these systems and implement them, like what the REITs have. From your perspective, ManageSpace is looking to be a revolutionary property management system to make these kind of processes easier and beneficial for operators and owners. Mm-hmm. What sort of metrics would you like to see, or reporting styles would you like to see from a property management software that you feel like would help streamline the sort of manned to unmanned transition, or make it easier to manage these properties?
I know like there needs to be something in place, because it's never good when we use Store Edge in our operations, which is totally fine. I know others that use SiteLink. And there's others that use, I forgot the other one now, the smaller one. But anyway, the point is that, they're all bought by one company, and that's fine. It's a great business plan. If I'm that company, that's super smart. I should have thought of that. We should have went out and bought everything, consolidated it. So I think there needs to be some more competition. That's always a good thing. Keeps you honest and keeps you on your toes and all that stuff. So competition is good. So we do need somebody else in the space. I think the integrations is part of it. I'm not I never want to be on the full-time on the management side. So it's not my area of expertise. But I know that when I talk to people, and even within our own systems, the integration of different technologies between renting online, the website, talking to the management software, letting them know what's going on. Somebody, so-and-so, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson rented X unit, whatever. They got to get a gate code. And then the gate is made by somebody else, and the keypad for all that, it has to talk to the keypad and let them know that this code is now a valid code to open the gate. There's always a hiccup there because you have 3 different companies trying to make it all work together with the APIs on the back end. I know that gets kind of onerous for some owners. So the idea would be have an Apple-type ecosystem, right, where it's all controlled and really nice, and you don't get many options, as the consumer or the customer, but that's because we can make it work, right, because we're the quote-unquote Apple version of storage. So I get it. It'll probably be a little bit more expensive, is my guess, but there needs to be something where it's like, hey, this is a package that works really well here's a complete system for you to implement at your store. You got to think about all the back end stuff. So I know that's it. I mean, within reporting itself, you can pretty much get what you need to get. From SiteLink, they have a lot of reports you can pick from. Storage does a great job as well with reporting. We haven't really run into an issue as far as finding the information we need to find. Sometimes it's a little bit onerous trying to work it with QuickBooks or with some sort of other, I forgot what we use, but other accounting software on the back end, getting all those things to talk nice to each other. But it can work. I don't think you want to develop the quote-unquote QuickBooks version for self-storage. But anyway, some of those back-end systems, the customer doesn't know, right? They just want to know why the gate isn't opening. But for the owner, they can go through a whole process of trying to figure out, why isn't the gate opening? I have no idea why that is. And you got to call 3 different places to figure out why the gate's not opening for the new customers. So some of those integrations on the back end, the API and et cetera, could be probably made better with a package that competes with the 600-pound, 6,000-pound gorilla in the room that you kind of have to go to get what you need to get. So,
absolutely. And to your point, just smoothing over any of those small issues, it just takes it off your plate, out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
So to that point, what tasks in your day-to-day now feels like takes up most of your time? I know you say you're not really big on the operating perspective, but even from the acquisitions, when you look through deals, what sort of metrics are very important to you, and what takes up most of your pain points that you think could be automated, or would you like to see in one place? Any kind of feedback that way?
Yeah, on the acquisition side, so that's my focus, is finding funding deals, right, getting them closed. So on the acquisition side, we have to build internal systems like a checklist, a lot of checklists, right, to make sure that we don't miss something on whether it be development or acquisitions, because you can forget, oh, shoot, I forgot to get that report or whatever the case may be. So some of those things we have in place to make sure we don't have to think about it, right? You just look at the list, go down the list, check them off, and get those things done. On the acquisition side, that's an art and science to it. So the science is we have an email set up where we're on all the broker email lists. All those deals come into one place, and then I hop on there and take a look. And that you just kind of got to go through. Like, there's really no automation there. Because even a deal, if I were to have a scrubber set up where, okay, we pick these markets, these words, keywords or whatever, you still might miss something that, hey, this deal is located in a state that's not on the list, but it's a great location, and it's a great city or market or whatever. It's a deal worth looking at. So for that reason, like, you want to go through and look at it yourself and kind of see, because there are a lot of instant no's. If it's in a certain state we're not looking at, it's an instant delete. There's not even a need to think about that, right? It's just an instant delete, hit the button, it's gone. Others, it's kind of like, hey, this one's a go deal. Let's take a look at this. Let's dig in further. And then a lot of them are on the fence. It's, maybe the size is right, but the market isn't exactly, or excuse me, the reverse. the market is right, but the size isn't quite there. But let's take a look and see what the NOI is. You kind of there's like an art and science to it. So
right, and that's the X factor, just your experience.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Like we got to buy in the right markets because we think about our exit plan is really important. So who can we exit this deal to? Can we sell it off to a REIT? Can we sell it off to another PE group that's larger than us? If the answer is yes, then let's take a look at that deal. If the answer is no, if it's a big 60,000 square foot deal, but it's in not a very good market or a place we don't want to be, I'm not going to waste my time on that, right? Because I'm thinking about the exit. Where do we want to go from there? If I tell you, hey, our deals are located in Charlotte, Denver, Colorado, and Greenville, South Carolina, you're like, oh, yeah, you don't got to think about it. Yeah. Like those are good markets. If I told you, hey, our deal's located in whatever, some other place, it's like, I don't know much about that market. Is that good? Vacaville, California, is that good? I don't know. That's my hometown. So, people wouldn't know about that spot, but it's a good spot. But you get the idea. Plus, and then the other side of it too is the investor side. So when we go to investors and raise capital, if I say, hey, we have a deal in, Fort Myers, Florida, or Austin, Texas, like right away, oh, that's a decent market. Okay, great. Let's take a look. If I told you some other market you never heard of, Vacaville, California, you might be like, I have no idea anything about that market, even though it might be a great market, growing market, whatever. You just don't know. So it's easier to go to investors with something like that when it's a well-known growing market versus something else. So, but there's still art and science to it, so not a lot to automate on that end. We do have, once a deal makes sense, we have a process for it, but still you got to look at each deal to see what does and doesn't make sense in the long run.
Absolutely. Like you said, it's like personal experience comes into play too. It's funny that you mentioned that you work so much in the Charlotte market. I just did a report this past week on the top 3. Well, Charlotte, within the top 25 markets, is the third fastest growing CVSA in 2022. It added 3.4% supply growth in last year alone, which is insane. So I kind of just wanted to have a nerd moment and pick your brain to see what your thoughts on the Charlotte market is and sort of what you can attribute that supply growth to.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. So if I just take a step back from storage for a second, look at it from the consumer side,
yes,
right, the regular person. Charlotte's got tons of jobs. We just had the FC, our football club, soccer club, start up. I think it was last year, if I'm not mistaken. We have okay sports, but that's really a big draw at this point in time. And it's just you got a lot to do in the area. You have Carowinds, you have the Whitewater Center, you have a lot of things to go do and see within the Charlotte market. There's so many breweries, it's ridiculous. So if you want to go to have a decent nightlife and whatnot, you can do that if you want. So jobs, number one, cost of living, of course. All those things put together make Charlotte a great place. Plus, it's easy to get to Raleigh if you need to go to Raleigh. It's easy to get to Greenville, South Carolina, Spartanburg. We're 4 or 5 hours from Atlanta. So it's a great little, as far as location-wise, it's a good spot as well. Weather is pretty mild for the most part. So just from the consumer side, if I'm getting a new job and I have an option of going to Charlotte or somewhere else, there's a lot of good reasons to pick Charlotte. And so that's why it's growing. You have the cost of living, the housing, et cetera, it's not astronomical. It wasn't actually badly affected during the last recession either, in 08-09, the previous 2 recessions ago. The prices didn't drop dramatically like you saw in California. They also didn't rise super fast either. So, that's kind of how Charlotte has been, compared to the rest of the country. So it's good from a consumer side. From the investor side, because you have the growth and people coming in, the population influx, of course, you're going to have from everything from multifamily to self-storage to other office, et cetera, retail. You're going to have You're going to have growth in all of those asset classes. So, in the storage side, it's no difference. Hey, if we see a growing market like Charlotte, let's build some storage. Now, within that, though, like you have Charlotte. If I'm holding up my hands, making kind of a circle. Like if this is all Charlotte here, there's going to be pockets within Charlotte. Like you might say, I don't know what the analysis looked like, but let's say. For some reason, we get stuck on that 6 square feet per person is equilibrium or 7 or whatever number people want to use. Okay, let's just say that's true, that's equilibrium. All right, well, you can find pockets in Charlotte where it's 3 square feet per person. So by that metric of 6, we're undersupplied in that little 3 to 5 mile radius, right? So you can always build more stores. So 100%. A complete metro might have a certain square feet per person that appears high, but within that metro, you can find pockets where it still makes sense to build or expand a facility, which is what we're doing right now. We own 1, 2, 3 in this market, and one of them we just got done with an expansion. The other, we are starting to move dirt this month for another expansion at that location. So, so there's opportunity there. Man, dude, where I live right now, I live on the north side of Charlotte. You have Redwood, if you want to look them up. They're like like duplex style, but only for it's either 55 or 65 and up, something like that. But seniors, basically, single level rental housing. They don't want to live in an apartment, but they can live in a single family home, and that's what they want, and they don't want to buy it for whatever reason, or they can't afford one right now, but that's where they live. You got one going in just up the street. You got another one coming in the other way, north of me. They have a new medical, et cetera, like center right up the street over here. They just built more apartments. They're putting in townhomes behind me. They just announced a new grocery store coming in, like literally up the street, like on the corner over here. So the corridor where I live is just growing like crazy. The traffic has gone up astronomically, it feels like. You drive out towards Huntersville. If people know this market, you drive out towards Huntersville. You have a new Publix going in, another senior housing, like a 4-story or 4-story senior housing development going in over there. More houses coming in over there. So it's just growth like crazy on both the north and south, everywhere you look in Charlotte. So, the demand is there from the consumer. If consumers are moving in, it makes sense to build more and to provide a service there for self-storage.
100%. I guess like my final question on this matter then is, how do you think rates sort of reflect this, like you said, job and population growth, which are all drivers for self-storage, versus the supply growth? And do you think that rates are going to be increasing in the area or staying the same, like what we've seen in New York? In the New York market, rates have not increased dramatically because of the increase in supply growth. Do you think that's going to be more of the same in Charlotte?
Yeah, it depends again on the little trade area, like the 3 to 5 mile radius around a store. Overall, I think we'll probably end up being flat this year. You know, if I'm just taking a wild guess as far as Charlotte is concerned, housing is going to slow down. It already has, and consumer behavior is going to change a little bit. I mean, cost of eggs. I see all the memes at the time of this recording online, right? All the memes about the cost of eggs right now. So those affect, the pocketbooks of consumers. So maybe instead of getting a unit, they're going to say, man, we just need to throw this stuff out, or whatever. Let's not hold on to it because we just can't afford a unit right now. So yeah, definitely we'll see. I think flat rates. I don't think we'll see them decline too much. But again, it just depends on where you're at within. If we're talking about Charlotte specifically, where you're at within this market. Where your locations are, what the supply looks like around you, what your competition looks like, et cetera. So, more development is not better, but we know, like, I'd rather have no more development in Charlotte ever. So, but that's not going to happen, right? That won't happen. So, and then I forgot, what was this? You had a second part to the question, right?
Oh, no, just sort of how rates would be affected by this growth in supply.
Oh, okay, got it.
All the drivers and stuff. So I was kind of seeing where the rates would go. That's something very
interesting. I think flat for the most part. That's if I had to take a guess, that's where I'd put my money.
Got it. I mean, Chris, that's just about all the time we have today. We actually went over, but I mean, I enjoy the conversation so much. Thank you for joining us today on the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, James.
And everything.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Had a great time. Thank you.